Hey everyone, I'm Kevin. 4 months ago, my wife and I decided to quit our job and spend a few months traveling. We just finished our 3 months cross United States car camping road trip with our Tesla Model Y. We want to share with you our experience on how to have a successful road trip with a Tesla. Our main focus were the national parks. We managed to hit 17 national parks in the US and was blew away by how unique each of them were. We also crossed tons of cities as well, such as Miami, New Orleans, Houston, and many others. We drove a total of 16,000 miles and we did not plan anything beforehand. So we basically just researched on what to do on the road. Obviously, there are so many reasons on why we love our Tesla for the road trip, but in this video, I'll be going over just the top 3. So the first reason is autopilot. Autopilot was what drove me to get a Tesla in the first place, and we absolutely love it. We think for those who own a Tesla and doesn't have autopilot, they're missing out on the best feature that Tesla actually offers. Throughout this entire 16,000 miles journey, autopilot was responsible for driving about 90% of the time. That's about 14,000 miles. So we mainly used it on interstate and local highways to stay in lane. Autopilot does offer automatically lane changes. However, we're not comfortable with using it yet since it was pretty unstable back then when we tried it. So this time, we just want to be conservative and stick with using it to stay on the lane. We do, however, keep our eyes on the road while it's on autopilot. Although we had to keep our eyes on the road, it actually saved us a lot of energy. It was a lot less fatigue because we didn't have to focus. In addition to that, we were able to look at the scenery around from time to time on the road instead of just mainly focusing on the road. So the second reason is that we save a lot of money on fuel. Since electricity is a lot cheaper than gas, especially now where gas prices are around $3 per gallon. For this entire 16,000 miles journey, we only spent around $760 on electricity charging. If we were to travel this with a gasoline car, assuming the car per mile per gallon is 15 and each gallon of gasoline costs about $3 now, it will cost us around $3,200. Basically, we save around $2,400 comparing to a gasoline car. With $2,400, we can possibly get another small vacation out of it. And the third reason is less maintenance costs. Compared to gasoline cars, the only maintenance we had to go through was to get our rear tires changed. It was partially because the tires already had 9,000 miles on it before the road trip. If we were to start the road trip with a new set of tires, then we wouldn't need to get the tires replaced on the road. If we were to do this road trip with a gasoline car, we will also have to change engine oils, brake pads a few times probably, on top of the tire change. Because we were going through a lot of the national parks and some of the hills were steep. We can't imagine how fast the brake pads we're out going downhill if we have a gasoline car. So where are you going to charge your car is the most common question that we got asked by our friends and others that we met on the road. It is also the biggest concern that we have before we drove the Tesla for the road trip. Throughout our entire 16,000 miles journey, we did not have any problems with it. We rely on mainly 2 sources of charging. So the first one, it's obviously the Tesla supercharger station. Supercharger stations are widespread enough now that we are able to find one every 40 to 60 miles along the interstate highway. It takes approximately 30 to 40 minutes to charge approximately 240 miles worth of electricity, depending on the supercharger level and also your battery. However, when you sway away from the interstates, like going towards the national parks, most of the national parks do not have superchargers nearby. For situations like this brings us to our second source of charging, which is the RV parks. RV parks are also widespread once you are away from the East Coast states. We did not have any problem finding one, starting from Louisiana all the way west to California and north to Washington and then east back home to New York. Most RV parks have both 30 amp and 50 amp electrical outlet. A 30 amp outlet charges the car about 10 miles per hour, so you need to get like 30 hours of charging depending on your battery status to have a full charge. And the 50 amp outlet charges your car about 30 miles per hour, so you get a full charge in 10 hours or less depending on your battery status. You do not have to pay extra for the electricity in the RV park because it's included on your site fee. We always stay at 50 amp sites when it's available, so we can always fully charge our car overnight. For this entire trip, we only went to like 2 RV parks that did not have 50 amps, so we stay at 30 amps for those 2. Charging in RV parks also save you money in a way because you get a free charge overnight. A full charge in supercharger can cost around $17 in most of the states. In order to charge at 50 amp and 50 amps, you do need to get an adapter for each of them. I have a link pasted below in the descriptions for both of the adapters. Please use the links if you need to get one. I do get a small commission out of every sale for the adapters. Since I don't have a job now for stable income, every bit helps. We mainly stay at 2 different types of facility throughout the trip for accommodation. One is the RV parks. RV parks were our top choice for accommodation because it's a lot cheaper than motels. In RV parks, we just sleep in the car with camo on, so we get the AC and the air circulation. We bought a custom Tesla Model Y memory foam mattress and brought it with us. We always make sure like the bathroom and the showers are clean for the ones that we stay in. You can easily find this out by reading the most recent review on Google Maps for the RV park. One thing we love the most about staying in RV parks is that we can get a free full charge overnight. This means that it can save us an hour from getting a full charge at the superchargers. And also charging at supercharger is not free. Typically it's around like $17. The prices range from like $35 to $70 a night, depending on the location you're at. When you're not around like any national parks, you'll probably find one that's around $35. For the ones around national parks, they're typically around $70. If you're sleeping in a tent for camping, one thing you need to make sure is that check with the RV park beforehand to see whether or not they allow tent on their RV sites, because some of the RV parks do not. We didn't have this issue because we were sleeping in our car. The second one are the motels. We only stay at motels if we couldn't find any RV parks. We did this mostly on the East Coast because RV parks were not as prevalent on the East Coast than from the middle to the West Coast. We don't really like staying at motels because they are expensive compared to RV parks. Motels are typically around like $80 to $110 per night versus like $35 to $70 a night for the RV parks. The mattresses in motels are also not as comfortable as our custom Tesla mattress, and they do not have charger for us to charge our Tesla overnight. We mainly use 3 mobile applications to look for accommodation on the road. The first is Google Maps. I don't think this one needs any introduction for anyone. It's Google Maps after all. The second one is the Dirt. The Dirt is a mobile application that you can use to find any campgrounds in the United States. And the third one is KOA. KOA is the mobile app for KOA campgrounds. they are the world's largest system for privately held campgrounds with more than like 500 locations across the United States and Canada. One thing that we love about KOA is that their campgrounds are usually huge, so they always have spots available for last minute reservation. In our situation, works great because we did not plan anything beforehand. In addition to that, they have mobile applications for you to make reservations with, so you don't have to actually call them, which is the case for most of the RV parks out there. They're still in this like ancient time, so you still have to make reservations through phone, with the exception of KOA. Although our main focus were the national parks, we also went to a lot of other attractions throughout 31 states. We mainly rely on three sources for finding attractions. First is the National Geographic book called 50 States, 5,000 Ideas. Second is another National Geographic book called USA National Parks. And the third one is TripAdvisor mobile app. I don't think TripAdvisor needs any introduction other than that. For places outside of the national parks, we normally read the chapter in the book first and then check out on what's available in the area on TripAdvisor. Most of the time, you'll find that the attractions mentioned in the book are the top ones on TripAdvisor. In hindsight, I don't think TripAdvisor is really necessary if you have the books. But when we were on the road, we wanted to use it to make sure that we didn't miss out on anything that interests us. For national parks, the National Geographic book is very extensive. It gives you ideas starting from things to look at if you only have one day to spend in the park to all the top attractions they recommend, so you can plan out your times accordingly. By going through these two books and following the guidance, it saved us a lot of time in comparison to doing research by Googling. The biggest problem with Googling on things to do for me is that the information are so scattered across different websites and each of them have their own opinion on things to see. It is not as extensive as the National Geographic books. This is also the first time that we use National Geographic books to plan out on what to do, and so far we love this approach. We will be using this in our future traveling plans as well. In fact, I just bought their books on Hawaii, Turkey, and Switzerland, since they will be our next destination. I have pasted the links below in the description for the two books that we used during this trip. Please use the links to buy them if you need. We mainly ate outside most of the time throughout the trip. I would say probably like 2/3 of the time, and 1/3 we cooked ourselves. We did bring a cooler to store food and a camping cooking set, so we can cook when we crave for like some Asian food. There are supermarkets everywhere, especially the towns around national parks, so you don't have to worry about looking for one to buy food if you want to cook yourself. We spent about $13,000 in total. This was acceptable for us because we were not doing budget traveling. As you can see, since we ate out a lot, food is also part of the experience that we want to experience. But if you want to save money, I think one thing that you can do is cook more often than eating out. It turns out to be, I think dining is one of our biggest expense throughout the trip. So if you really do want to save money, you could optimize in that sense. We learned so much on this road trip and wanted to share with you 3 additional tips that will prevent you from getting headaches with a Tesla. So the first one is always have 150% battery capacity to your driving mileage. For example, if you want to drive 100 miles, make sure you have 150 miles of your battery capacity left just to be safe. This is very important because when you drive across different states, they can have different landscapes. Some of the roads will have more uphill than others, so it will consume more electricity. After our continuous testing, we figured out that 150% is a good ratio to have. The second one is to prolong mileage by drafting behind a semi. So I normally don't do this when I'm driving a gasoline car because you have to focus more intensely if you're drafting behind a semi driving manually. But since Tesla have autopilot and it works amazingly well, like following a car, we did this a lot on the road. When we draft behind a semi, it actually saved us approximately 20% of the mileage. For example, if we were to drive 100 miles ourselves, we might end up consuming 120 miles worth of electricity. But when we draft behind a semi, we only end up consuming 100 miles. This can help you save both time and money because the more mileage that you save, it also means the less time you have to spend at superchargers. And the third one is we stick to a maximum 4 hours driving per day. The reason why we pick 4 hours is because we only want to stop at supercharger at most once each day, since it is time consuming and our body gets fatigued after 4 hours, like driving on the road, sitting in the car. With the range that we get from a nearly full charge every morning and one stop at the supercharger for 80 to 90% capacity, that'll last about 4 hours of driving. After 4 hours of driving, our battery is usually low. We'll stop at the RV park for the night and it gives us a full charge the next morning. But if you don't mind spending more time on the road each day at the supercharger, you can always drive more than 4 hours. We didn't want to do that because we were not on a strict time schedule and wanted to take the road trip easy. This is all I have for this video. Please don't forget to comment below if you have any questions. Like this video if you think the content is helpful. Follow me on Instagram with the link below and subscribe so you don't miss my future videos. Thank you for watching. Hope this is helpful. Bye.